Okay, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Avodah Zara, Daf Samach Zayin. We're starting about 5 lines down at the 2 dots. Thank you to Rabbi Hamler for covering the last couple of days. We're going to be discussing tonight a very, very practical halacha, which we refer to in halacha world as no sein tam lifgam. We use that broadly speaking as a kula. We'll see that not all of the opinions in the Gemara were makil when it comes to no sein tam lifgam. Particular the Shita of Reb Meir, which we'll get to soon. But that's where we're going to be focusing our time on. I don't want anyone to get confused about psak. In general, when it comes to no sein tam lifgam, we are lenient in general. There are some rare exceptions to the rule. Let's get started. At the 2 dots are ze'aklal, kol shba'ana asu v'no sein tam v'chulei. So let's see what this is talking about. Amar Yehuda Mar Shmuel, hachi hilchasa. This is the halacha that no sein tam lifgam is mutter. Amar Yehuda Mar Shmuel, lo shanu ela shenofa l'toch gris and roscha. When do we say that this is true? When this was talking about vinegar that fell into boiling hot grisen, which is beans. Aval nafa l'soch grisen sonin and v'her tichan. Let's say that they were first put in on top of cold beans, and then v'her tichan, and then they were boiled. Nasa k'mishish biach ul v'sof pagam v'aser. That's worse. If they were added when things were cold, and then it was heated up, so vinegar in its raw form with another raw thing, that's never great, usually not at least. And then you heat things up, and then the vinegar does whatever it does, but it's a lesser flavor now, right? So that's what the Gemara says. That's not considered no sein tam lifgam. This is a bit of a twist on no sein tam lifgam, because had it been that vinegar fell into cholent, it would have been no sein tam lifgam as mutter and hot cholent. But had it been that it fell into cold cholent and was boiled in, that's no sein tam l'shvach and would be usher if the vinegar was in fact usher. So that's what the Gemara says is the twist. B'chenki asa ravin, amar Rabba bar Chana amar Rav Yochanan. We're a third of the way down on Samach Zayin Amar Aleph. Lo shanu el shanafa l'soch gris and roschen. We're only saying that it's no sein tam lifgam mutter when it falls into an already hot dish, where the vinegar itself wasn't being cooked with the food. Aval nafa l'soch gris and sonin and v'her tichan. But if it fell into a cold dish, and really be'etzem that food is usher, but it fell into a cold dish and then v'her tichan it was boiled in, then nasa kimishi sviachul v'so pagam b'aser. That does not work, because there's shvach there. There's shvach. You benefited from it. So that is how the Gemara views this. And then it just says v'chule, and doesn't say all the rest of the same jargon. But if you look on the side there, it repeats all the lines again in the kisvei yad. V'chein hevi hadikduke sofrim shebetosvos v'chule. Really,
I have a v'chule, by the way.
I have chu,
Yeah.
but on the side it says the full text. You say vichu?
No, just chu.
Chu. Yeah.
The point being,
it's just saving ink. That's correct. But the kisvei yad did have this in the full text. Why is that necessary? I don't know. I don't know what the nafkamina would be to have it or to not. V'chein amar X, v'chein amar Y, v'chein amar Z. But nevertheless, for Daf Yomi purposes, you always like repetitive things. You know what I'm saying? But that's definitely not what they were motivated by.
It's a cross-reference all the other Dimi instances throughout Shas.
Yeah.
I mean, it's somewhat helpful. But just learn this again. You'll see that it's clear. It's crystal clear. So that's what the Gemara says. And this idea of shehishbiach ulevisof pagam is in fact quoted in Shulchan Aruch. So if you have something that's usher, that's mixed into something before it's cooked and then it was cooked, then we don't say no sein tam lifgam is usher, because the food cooked in, it's different. It's not the same thing. It's just when you pour the usher vinegar in after the food is cooked, then we say no sein tam lifgam. It's going to be usher. All of this is different than the shilas that we ask Rabbanim about. Our modern application of no sein tam lifgam has to do with blios, with the absorptions from within a kli. So if I take my macaroni and cheese pot, we have a famous recipe of Bubby's noodles. Bubby would be my mother. It's extremely cheesy. It's extremely milchik. So if you use that within 24 hours for flesh, that's ben yomo, within 24 hours. And then we don't yet say no sein tam lifgam is mutter. We say within 24 hours that the blios are l'shvach. So then you're not going to get a good kula on that one. Sfardim hold differently in general. They're more lenient here. But the Ashkis are pretty machmir on this kind of stuff. I know. Tell that son-in-law of yours. Tell him what the Ashkis said. Yeah. What? I know, yeah. It's unbelievable. What a commitment.
it's talk about the catering, regular Kool-Aid, but that's one thing.
Like your rice and place.
That is not a word. That is a difficult trade.
Deal.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'll take no rice.
Yeah. The hour of slichos is just so hard. The timing, like if you do it at the right time, if you do it right, it's very, very hard. What's that?
Saying if you're the first menu by us, and everything was earlier, like tomorrow morning, it's
Yeah.
7:45, 7:45, it's always 7:45.
Yeah. Carpool doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Halfway down. This was the dish that they would make, where they would add vinegar, they'd add it and they'd cook it in. The kohen osam shachalayim. A little bit of a weird word to use here, because this is actually not shachalayim like we see in the rest of Shas, which is made out of cress, some type of vegetable. This is actually the bean thing that we were talking about earlier, where they add a little bit of vinegar and they cook it in. So that was a normal dish to make. It's just that if you make it with usr vinegar, it's going to be usr. Amar Reish Lakish. Two versions of Reish Lakish here, and we have to figure out which one we hold like. The first one is a chumrah, and the second one is a kula. Amar Reish Lakish. No sein tam nefgam she'amru. When we say that there's a heter of no sein tam nefgam, when is that true? Lo sheyomru. It won't apply when there's something else wrong with the dish. Kedei rezu chazer melach or yaser melach. There isn't enough salt, or there's too much. Chaser tavlin or yaser tavlin. The heter of no sein tam nefgam is mutter. Doesn't apply when there's something else wrong with the dish. Ela kol she'ein chasera klum, only when the dish is missing nothing. But now with this new addition, it's not edible. Then we have the heter of no sein tam nefgam. This is a big chumrah, because even if a dish is missing a little bit of salt, then we don't say no sein tam nefgam is mutter. We would say no sein tam nefgam is still asur. So very, very, very broad. So if you make a dish that, let's say somebody who's cooking in your house is not such a geshmak cook, and then something falls into that, which is a pagum, it's not mutter, because your wife's a terrible cook. So if there's something else wrong with it already, we don't apply on top of that the leniency of no sein tam nefgam is mutter. That's version number one of Reish Lakish. 10 lines, 8 lines from the bottom of Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. Reish Lakish. No, it's not like that. No sein tam nefgam she'amru. When do we say that no sein tam nefgam is mutter? Ein omrim. We don't say kedei rezu chasera melach yisera melach or chasera tavlin yisera tavlin. We don't worry about what else was going on, what else was wrong with the dish. Whatever you're adding now is a pagam. It's an inherent pagam. You're adding vinegar when it shouldn't have been there. No sein tam nefgam is mutter, even if your wife is already a bad cook. So these two shitas have a lot of nafkaminas lemaisa. The first approach is very, very machmir, and the second approach is what we're used to, and it's actually how we paskin. This will be found in the same halachos that we saw earlier in the Shulchan Aruch and Yerodea Kuf Gimel. Let's see if we can find some proofs to this second shita, the one that we do hold of. Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol shetamo umamasho aser. If there's a food that has a flavoring that's aser, and there's a mamashos that's aser, meaning there's like a shiur there, ve lokin alav, and you would have gotten malkos for eating it, v'zehu kezayis bechdei achilas pras. Famous halacha that we have to make sure we should try to avoid. But if we are going to be eating this iser, and we're going to say you're chayiv, when are you chayiv? Only if you're chayiv. Only if you eat that food, b'chtei achilas pras. This just came up on Shabbos. We had this halacha happen. Where were we? Oh, no, not on Shabbos. I think we were at Emma's this past week, and I ordered something with a bagel on the side, eggs with bagel on the side. So I had a little bit of the bagel. B'koshi Rava ate a kazayis, but I definitely did not eat a kazayis b'chtei achilas pras. Pashut, I didn't. So I had no chiyuv in birkas hamazon at all, not even a little bit. Zero chiyuv in benching, because I didn't eat it b'chtei achilas pras. So that's true by mitzvos, and it's true by isurim too. So that's why what we do on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, if somebody, God forbid, has to eat b'shiurim, what does that mean that they eat b'shiurim? It means that they eat below the threshold of b'chtei achilas pras. So they eat. You can eat as much. The volume isn't even the problem. It's the b'chtei achilas pras is the problem. So let's say that one granola bar, just making this up, one little chewy granola bar is the shiur of Isser de'oraisa on Yom Kippur. So fine, eat 3/4 of one and wait 9 minutes, and then eat a little bit more. And now you're outside whatever the shiur is. That's also machlokas, what b'chtei achilas pras is, different shita. Okay, so here the Gemara says that if there's tam and mamashos, and you'll get malchus if you ate that shiur. So on the top of samach zayin and beis, we have a diuk. Tamu v'lo mamasho. If you had the flavoring without the actual mamashos, there isn't enough actual isser there. Usser, it is still usser, but the ain lo can alav. There's no malchus. Brisa continues. V'im riba ta'am lifgam. If there is extra riba, if there's a lot more riboy to include, if we include other bad flavors, then mutter. So the Gemara picks up on this. Why did you say riba? Why did you say v'im riba ta'am lifgam? What do you mean added flavors? Vilema, if you wanted to say like version number 1 of Reish Lakish, then it should have said im nasan tam lifgam mutter. Why did it say riba? Hakamash malan da'afagav de'ikamili achar niyasa depagma behadeh. Even if it already tasted bad, we'll still have the leniency of no sein tam lifgam is mutter. So this is a validation of Shita number 2, which is Reish Lakish number 2, which is how we hold. And the Gemara says ve'ilchazak kalishna bas for the Reish Lakish, that we hold that no sein tam lifgam applies even if the Rebbetzin is not such a good cook. Sometimes it gave you the excuse to not eat the food. When she made it the first time, you couldn't say no. You're married, you want to stay that way. But now that the vinegar, oh no, the vinegar felt, your dish was amazing before, but now I can't eat it. So the Gemara says that is how we apply the rules of no sein tam lifgam. No matter what preceded it, no matter how good or bad the food was before, if we have an added layer of pigam, then we say no sein tam lifgam is mutter. Now again, this is not talking about our usage of no sein tam lifgam. It's talking about something like sour falling into the dish. It's different than how we typically use it in psak, even though this is accurate. Amar Rav Kahana, midivrei kulam nilmad. What do we learn from all of these shitas? That is that nilmad, that no sein tam lifgam is mutter. That if we had this additive, then it is going to be mutter. A little correction in the name of Rav Kahana. It could be that it was talking about Rava, who lived just a drop later, I believe, than Rav Kahana. I think he was one generation later. Amar le Abaye, and this is why they had to change it to Rava, because Abaye, Amar le, Abaye was talking to someone, but Rav Kahana lived before Abaye. So Amar le Abaye says to Rava, it seems, Bishlam mikulhu lachaya. I could understand that the majority of people do hold this way. I agree. Ela de Reish Lakish. If you look back actually at the language, the syntax that Reish Lakish used, it said Amru ka'amar. Really interesting phraseology. If you look back at when we started at Reish Lakish, here's his language. I'm reading now from 2/3 of the way down on Samach Zayin and Aleph. Amar Reish Lakish, no sein tam lifgam sha'amru. When they said no sein tam lifgam, so hold on one second. Was that not his opinion? Was he quoting from other people? So that's what the Gemara picks up on. And we're 1/3 of the way down on Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Ela de Reish Lakish, Amru ka'amar v'lei lo svirale. Perhaps he is just quoting in the name of others because he said Amru. It wasn't his own shita. And maybe he himself did not hold that no sein tam lifgam is mutter. Maybe he held that no sein tam lifgam is aser. Mechlal di'ikal amant amar no sein tam lifgam aser. So says the Gemara, you're 100% right. It could very well be that Reish Lakish was referring to a shita in the Tanaim who held that no sein tam lifgam is aser. So let's just spell that out. If you pour the vinegar into the challah, the vinegar is aser, let's say out from Avodah kochav, whatever it is, even if you're willing to eat it, no sein tam lifgam is aser. You're still not allowed to eat it. And if this were to also be true, that would also mean that by our blios, even after 24 hours, it would be aser. So I've mentioned this here before. There's a shita in the poskim. The name of the sefer is called the Kresi Uplesi, and he holds that when it comes to basar b'chalav, that the blios never transfer into no sein tam lifgam. He holds that if you have a milchik pot and you've used it for fleishiks, and now there's double blios, milchiks and fleishiks in the walls, it's never no sein tam lifgam. It's always no sein tam l'shvach, which means you could never use the kalim ever again.
Not that it's just something about them, or it's because it's an issue. I know it's like a really, like what is,
No, I don't think it. I don't remember. I have it in my notes.
you know what I'm saying? This is
Yeah.
that cheeseburgers are so good, or is it?
Yeah,
He just never cleans his grill.
it could be the Isra Hana piece, but
That's why.
but the only time we have an Isra Hana is when they were done together, when the bishul was done at the same time. Like for example, if one were to eat a piece of deli and a piece of cheese, it's an Isra D'Rabbanan. What?
maybe the pleo together as a humrah to somebody. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
It could be that that's his
the
chumrah.
shot is if it tastes bad, that shouldn't really make a difference whether
Correct.
you're talking about treif animal or
Correct,
or
correct.
whatever else.
It's a wild chumrah, and like, look, nowadays we can just go to Target and get another pot for like $12. So like, it's not.
But it's not that it tastes bad, it's that it has a halachic status of tasting bad. If
That's
you
what we're
aged
talking- yeah, no.
foods
So why would
in
there
there,
be
there's
No,
differentiate
right.
from one answer to the next?
Correct. Right. Once you're saying that outside of basar b'chalav, I have no same time lifgam. Why don't we have it with basar b'chalav? Who cares? Food's gonna be a little bit spoiled. Yeah, it makes sense that it's something they aim at. And I remember my Rebbe said that it was a chumrah, and that we obviously don't hold that way. But it's a shita in the poskim. It's not like a random rishon that didn't make it to Shulchan Aruch. This is post Shulchan Aruch. Like we have, yeah. So it's a very machmir shita. Yeah. So, anyways, the Gemara says, it seems from Reish Lakish that perhaps there is a shita that holds no same time lefgam is usher still. So says the Gemara, you're right. Tanya, we see this in a brisa. And look at this. This is so clear. Echad no same time lefgam. The echad no same time l'shvach. Usher divi Reb Meir. What's Reb Meir famous for? Ischayish l'miuta. I don't know if that's exactly what's going on here, but that definitely seems to be Me'ain his shita, that he would be concerned for this kind of thing. Nevertheless, the Gemara says that Reb Meir holds that no same time lifkam is always going to be usher. So that could be what was meant to be inferred from the weird wording of Reish Lakish, who said, Amru, what they said, not what I said, what they said. Who's the they? The they is Reb Meir. However, in this brisa, we see the contention, the different opinion of Reb Meir, which is Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Omer, that's not true. L'shvach aser, and this is where we would say l'dugma. Within 24 hours, we consider it l'shvach, and that's a ben yoma or a bas yoma. Both phraseologies are acceptable. And the Gemara says that Reb Shimon holds that l'shvach is aser. That's always going to be problematic, and v'lifgam is mutter. And if the flavoring is bad, so then it's going to be mutter. And we make this distinction in Psak of Ben Yomo, that once something hits 24 hours, it could be the best tea, the best flavored food in the world. Once it hits 24 hours, so then it's automatically lifkam. And then if you accidentally, you can't do it lechatchila, but if you accidentally cooked in it, we don't assume that the absorptions that come out of the wall are problematic at all. Are there any real absorptions in our kalim nowadays? Probably not in our silverware. Rabbi Chaim Tversky did this whole chemistry experiment I told you about. So these are like modern shilas. Like I know Rav Shechter is more makel on silverware because of these kinds of things. Because it's like, if the blios are real, then we should be worried about them. Plastic is totally different, right? You're talking about the pottery of a challah pot, totally different, totally different. Those absorb. Okay, now let's get into the lamdas of this brisa. My time of the Reb Meir. What is the reason why Reb Meir was of the opinion that no sein tam lifgam and no sein tam l'shvach are both aser? We understand why no sein tam l'shvach is aser. You're eating a yummy tasting tarfis, that we understand. But why would it be that no sein tam lifgam is aser? So says the Gemara that in the name of Rav Meir, Gamar mi gi'ule ovdei kochavim. We learn it from gi'ule ovdei kochavim. We knew when we took kalim from Midyan, we had to do hagala. Why did we have to do hagala? Must be that there were blios inside the kalim. We were concerned about to do hagala. So therefore, says the Gemara, Gilu of de kochavim lav no sein tam lefkamhu ve'aser achmanu hachanami loshna. Obviously, some of their kalim were more than 24 hours old. Maybe all of their kalim were more than 24 hours old. But the Torah doesn't make a distinction. The Torah says about Gilu of de kochavim, you need to do hagala. So therefore, why does it matter? Who cares if it's no sein tam lefkam or no sein tam l'shvach? It should all be completely aser. But haraya that by the minyanim we had to do giule of de kochavim. We had to clean the kalim. The idach. What would Reb Shimon say back to that svara? 5 lines from the bottom. So Reb Shimon would say, and this is really a very, very important line. This is where we get our distinction of Ben Yomo from. This line of Gemara right here. Kid Rav Huna b'rei de Rav Chia. To Amar Rav Huna b'rei de Rav Chia, lo asra Torah, ela kedera bas yoma, de lo lifkamhu. The only time there is a problem with no sein tam is when it's lishvach, and that's only when it's a bas yoma. or we're used to saying ben yomo, but bas yomo is actually the language of the Gemara. De lo lifgamhu, within that ben yomo period. So then it is the lo lifgamhu. Rashi says bas yoma shebishel ba'ovid kochavim hayom de lo lifgam. That is the flavor is great. So this is the distinction that he makes. This also, of course, makes it into Shulchan Aruch, and this is how we paskin. This is exactly how we paskin. Within ben yomo, if we say that something is a ben yomo, it means that it's been used with heat for either milk or meat, whichever one, or tarfis or whatever, within 24 hours. That by definition is no same time, lishvach, and always aser. But once you break the threshold of 24 hours, and we're going to talk about, let's say you cooked in milchiks and now you accidentally cooked in fleshiks. So then we say once it's 24 hours and a minute, magically, halachically, all of a sudden, instantly, no same time, lifgam and mutter. So that's how Reb Shimon pushes back on the argument of Gi'ulei Nachrim. When do we say the din of Gi'ulei Ovdei Kochavim? That's only true when it's a Bas Yoma. But once it's a Eino Ben Yoma, once it's outside of 24 hours, so then it's no Sin Tam Lifkam, and then it's Mutter. V'idach, what would Rav Meir say back to Reb Shimon? Kedei Rabas Yoma Nami, Efshar de lo Pag Maporta. Fascinating svara. Rav Meir says, come on, even within 24 hours, you don't think the milk's going to curdle a little bit that was absorbed into the walls of the... So he holds that the distinction of Rav Huna, Berei de Rav Chia, was an irrelevant distinction, a distinction without a difference. We hold stark of this chakira of Ben Yomo, but Rav Meir doesn't hold of it. Rav Meir says, and I'll just say it in our parlance, there's a continuum. Right when you cook, the food is fresh. Rav Shimon says it's perfect until 24 hours. Rav Meir says, no, it starts to be nifkam right away. Slowly but surely, the milk that's in the walls gets worse and worse and worse. And look what we see. Gi'ulei Ovdei Kochavim was required, even within 24 hours. V'haraya, stop making your categorical distinction that 24 hours somehow is a magical number. All of a sudden, we don't have to be concerned about the no same time lifkam anymore, the shvach anymore. No, he says that it's always lifkam. And that's probably true scientifically. We know milk will just get worse and worse by the minute. Our milk is ultra pasteurized, so we usually don't have so many problems. But their milk was not at all pasteurized. Rav Tendler told me when I took his class in YU, he said that the milk in his house was dark colored. He said his parents used to get milk and they would boil it every time they would feed it to their kids so that it would kill all the bacteria. But after many boils, like the coloring, I don't know, I guess it got darker. Makes sense. I don't know. That's what he said they did. We don't live like that. We have pasteurized milk. So our milk has been heated to very high temperatures to kill all bacteria, to make it very unlikely that it will turn sour as quickly as it does. Afal Pekin, we still get sour milk, but we get a good 7, 8, 9 days out of it until someone dumps the whole thing on the floor under the fridge. Then you don't have any more milk anymore. And then you know what no same time lifgam is. Okay, so that's the argument back against Rav Shimon that Rav Meir would hold that no, it's always getting worse by the minute, and therefore the Gi'ulei Ovdei Kochavim even included something which was a ben yom. Let's get into the svara of Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon, my timer. Why is it that Rav Shimon was of the opinion that, and we'll just quote his language from the Brisa, which is halfway down. Rav Shimon Omer l'shvach aser v'lifgam muter. Why did he hold that l'shvach is aser and lifgam is muter? Says the Gemara. It says the Tanya. That seems to be a mistake. It should say dichsiv, which is totally different. Dichsiv. The pasuk says lo sochlu kol nevela leger asher bisharecha, and then the rest of this pasuk should say titnena ve'achla o machor. It's not how you didn't eat. We're a disciplined people when it comes to food. So the pasuk says, you're not allowed to eat a nevela. And if there is a nevela that you happen to have, you have to give it to a ger or sell it to a ger. In this case, of course, a ger doesn't mean someone who converted, obviously, because otherwise you're feeding it to another yid. That's not allowed. So this ger means a stranger. Huh? Or a ger toshav, yeah. Who's also not a yid yet. So how do we define this nevela? Kol ha'ru'uya leger, if it's fitting for the ger to eat, so then kruya nevela. Then we'll call it a nevela. And on the top of Sameches Amud Aleph, we see she'ein ru'uya leger, if the nevela was so not good that even the ger wouldn't eat it. It's just not edible. So then, Eina Kriya Nevela. It's not called Nevela. Rashi, She'ein Ru'uya Lager. Why would it not have been fit for a ger? Shehisricha. Alma, Mide Ifkim, Batal Isura. Once it becomes pagum, it's not Nevela anymore. So what do you see? No, saying Tam Luf Gam is mutter. So that's how he says that. I am intrigued by the correction of the Gemara that says, by the way, Dichsiv on the bottom. I'm intrigued by it because we have a drasha after the pasuk, right? So who wrote that drasha? So I'm not totally sure how the Dichsiv actually works, because there is a drasha afterwards, and I don't know who wrote it. Which is why the Tanya would have made more sense. But if there was never a brisa like that, then okay, I get it. I'm not a historian. I don't know. But it is, again, an odd piece of Gemara when we look at it from a structural perspective, because who said that? who wrote that? Who darshan the pasuk? So right, so we have to see over there, but either way, if it says Dichsiv over there, I'll be just as confused, because at the end of the day, who authored it? If you would have said the Tanya, then I would understand why Reb Shimon says what he says, and the Tanya makes a lot of sense. So over here in the footnote, it doesn't really help that much. So that was what you pointed out, but that doesn't really help. Okay, Reb Meir, how would you respond? I guess I'll say to the drasha of Kol Haru'uya Lager Kriya Nevela. Reb Meir, Hahu Lemeute Srucha Me'ikara. What you just said, that She'ein Ru'uya Lager Eina Kriya Nevela, that if there is a piece of meat that is not even edible for a ger, for a goy in this case, it's not even considered Nevela. Reb Meir says that's not if it turned, that's if it was always that way. I bought chicken this past week at Jewel, opened it, smelled bad, brought it right back to the store. It was always like that. It didn't happen in my fridge. It didn't happen in my house. So if it was always srucha, so that's what the pasuk means. But if something is no same time lifkam, something becomes, if it's ifkim, if it becomes bad, still usher according to Reb Meir. That's how he would learn this. So Reb Shimon says you can't learn that way, Reb Meir. Reb Shimon says srucha meikara lo tzricha miuta. I don't need a miut for that. Pasha, that's afra ba'almahu. If you have a piece of meat from a nevela that's rancid, that's not nevela. That's disgusting. No one's going to eat that. And if you ate it, you might not even be chayiv for nevela. That's not royal achilas kelev. It's disgusting, and therefore it does not have a din of nevela. Obviously, you can see this this growing tension between Reb Shimon and Reb Meir with these Mar Makomos. We're of course mid sugya, and the next words are Amar Ula Machlokes, is where we're going to get into more of this Machlokes, but we'll pick up right here tomorrow night with Amar Ula. Wishing you all a beautiful night.